Today, the 115th Congress was sworn in. It should have been a day of unity for Republicans, celebrating the beginning of their unilateral control of the federal government. But instead, the first fissures in GOP unity appeared. Last night, House Republicans quickly and quietly voted to gut the Independent Ethics Office. It was set up after congressional scandals in 2008. Instead, they proposed investigations be funneled through the House Ethics Committee, removing a very important degree of separation, according to House Democrats, like Massachusetts Representative Seth Moulton.
They completely blindsided us, and it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, is there any American out there who thinks Congress is too ethical? Donald Trump and the Republicans said they're going to drain the swamp, and the very first thing they do is dismantle our outside ethics watchdog.
President-elect Trump chastised the congressional members who were behind this move, tweeting, "Well, all that Congress has to work on, do they really have to make the weakening of the independent ethics watchdog, as unfair as it may be, their number one act and priority? Focus on tax reform, health care, and so many other things of far greater importance. Hashtag DTS, drain the swamp." Well, today, those renegade Republicans got bit by something in that swamp and withdrew their proposal to abolish the Independent Office of Congressional Ethics. Maybe government by tweet does work. Sometimes. This all comes as Trump gets ready to tackle an ambitious agenda while experiencing the difference between campaigning and governing. Joining me are Lauren Dusensky, a reporter for Politico. Good to see you, Lauren. Jim Rapport, former chair of the Massachusetts State Republican Party. Hi, Jim. And Scott Ferguson, a former press secretary, Senator Ted Kennedy, who is now president of the Liberty Square Group. Scott's good to see you. So if I said to you as a Republican, Jim, come up with the worst possible way to kick off Republican control of all this stuff, could you have done a better job than eliminating this independent ethics watchdog?
They absolutely stepped in it. And
moronic.
They got called on it, and they changed it. So
and do you not worry? I mean, it seems to me this is the kind of thing that may have a long shelf life, even though they change it quickly. If I'm a Democrat, what I would say every time anything's introduced by Republicans, remember, these are the same people whose first act was to attempt to gut this independent ethics oversight committee.
Well,
that's going to stay around a while, no?
I don't think so. I think it has a very short life because they're going to be starting to work on repealing and replacing Obamacare. They're going to be working on tax reform, on real issues that impact real people.
I want to get back to the real issues in a couple of seconds. You have to admit, as a Democrat, this, as I said before, this government by tweet thing, which has been ridiculed by Democrats throughout the land, it worked today. I mean, whether it was strategic, planned, collaboratively with Paul Ryan, who was on the correct side of this, frankly, but he lost his own Republicans. He tweets, and it's gone.
He does, and it did work, and it worked. It worked for Ford. It worked for Carrier. It's worked we're in uncharted territory in terms of impact. I mean, it's remarkable when you think about it. He's not president of the United States yet. And yet he affected the first day of Congress. And I think when
he took on his fellow Republicans, not just affected the first day.
But I also think Congress. I mean, I think the Democrats are as tone deaf as the Republicans are.
How so?
Well, I just think they are. I mean, you're down in Washington, and you sort of come back in, and you think everything reverts to the way that you do business. And I think Donald Trump has shown that that's not the case.
I want to get to the Democrats in a second. Just staying there. John King from CNN was on the radio with us today. He said he shamed them on their first day. Do you think it's got a longer shelf life than Jim Rapport does? I mean, I think it's a pretty. I don't think people understand the intricacies. But wait a second, they were against ethics in some fashion. Their first move, does that have a shelf life or no?
I mean, if anything, it just shows that this type of narrative, like Republicans, kind of altered the narrative that they could have had very perfectly done at the beginning of the term, right? Like this was supposed to just be a layup, and they basically went in with a totally different story, with what they did last night.
And it seems to me the story that should concern people like you, meaning Republicans, John, I mean people like you, and Republicans, Jim Rapport, is there are troubles in the ranks. As I said before, not only was Donald Trump on the other side of this, Paul Ryan and his number two, Kevin McCarthy, were on the other side too. So it's not like everything's going to be a slam dunk. Republican president proposes and Republican Congress disposes, right?
Well, it's not going to be a slam dunk. And one of the things to realize is, unlike the Democrats in Congress right now, which are incredibly monolithic and incredibly liberal, you've got a variety of opinions in the Republican Party. So you're going to have these dust-ups. You're going to have dust-ups on trade. You're going to have other dust-ups. There are areas where they're going to agree.
Building a wall and all those sort of things. So you brought up your Democrats. So let's just talk about the Democrats for a second. It seems to me that they don't get it so far. The Rust Belt decided this election. So who should we have? We'll have in the Senate be led by someone from one of the most liberal communities in America, Brooklyn, And in the House, let's be led by someone from the most liberal community in America, San Francisco, and they're still fighting over the DNC. So are they ready? What did you mean a minute ago? Are they ready for this battle, or they're still stunned by Donald Trump as president-elect?
Clearly they're stunned by Donald Trump as president-elect, and I think much like America, they're having they're having a hard time trying to figure out how to deal with him. But I think Democrats have a fundamental problem, and I'll look at the Carrier deal or the Ford deal. Democrats used to care about individual jobs, saving individual jobs. My boss, Ted Kennedy, would go fight for 25 jobs. Now we don't care about your job. We care about job indicators. We care about growth. And that's where we lost the Midwest.
Well, if Josh Earnest, the press secretary of the president, was here, he'd say we saved hundreds of thousands of jobs in the auto industry when we bailed it out despite opposition. That doesn't count.
So people in Ohio didn't think so. People in Pennsylvania didn't think so.
Because it was not small enough in some ways.
Right.
No, it wasn't even that. It was how they saved it. They realized that there were a lot of ancillary businesses that got really crushed in that process of saving the unions. And that's on the Midwest. They looked at it as that this deal that Obama did was to save the unions and their health care, and it wasn't about their jobs.
Yeah, I want to get back to your old job for a minute. Ted Kennedy, his brilliance, and I think even detractors would agree, one of the great. You have
Absolutely
some connection to him. Did you run against him?
No,
once?
I didn't, but I ran a campaign.
Okay. Reaching across the aisle, and I experienced when I was a legal services lawyer, and legal services was threatened by Ronald Reagan. He reached across the aisle in ways that are almost unimaginable. That art does not exist. Whether it's the Republicans' fault or the Democrat, it doesn't exist anymore, does it, or does it?
Well, it does a little bit. I mean, Seth Moulton, you were talking with him earlier today, and he talked about how he had a couple of bipartisan bills. So because of the volatility, because of what Jim talks about in the Republican Party, the polarization within the party, there are opportunities for Democrats to get some wins here, particularly since Donald Trump's agenda, he wants to spend like a drunken Democrat on a lot of things.
Like infrastructure.
Infrastructure, that's all stuff I love.
You know, but it seems to me, Lauren, that the Democrats have great potential to be hoisted, I love this expression, on their own petard. Yeah. On the biggest issue that we're really not talking about much so far, around inaugural time, 2 or 3 weeks from now, Donald Trump's going to say who he wants to replace Antonin Scalia. And Chuck Schumer, indirectly, the new Senate leader from Brooklyn, responded to this today. Here's Schumer talking about it.
I said both for Supreme Court and in Cabinet should be 60. Because on such important positions, there should be some degree of bipartisanship. I won on Supreme Court, lost on Cabinet, but it's what we have to live with now.
Not the greatest situation when you're in the minority.
Wish it hadn't happened.
The potential of the Democrats getting a taste of their own medicine on a Supreme Court nominee is very real, is it not? The Republicans can just say, this is exactly what you wanted, and now we're going to do it. No?
Absolutely. I mean, it massively backfired. And if anything, the dismantling of Obamacare, we'll be seeing that in what they pursue with, basically...
for the budget process.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, when you say this, I have to say...
How about 115 judges are going to be nominated by the Republicans in the next 3 months, and they will all be federal judges, and they will all be seated by June.
You mentioned, because of this 51,
because of the 51.
As opposed to the 60 rule.
That's right.
But you mentioned Obamacare a couple of times, and Lauren, you just mentioned the repeal or whatever you said about it. When I look at the disarray in the Republican Party, you said something positive about it. I would call it disarray. You say it's, tolerating differences of opinion. I'm not so sure they have the votes to dismantle this Obamacare. There are 20 million people. It's one thing to oppose something. It's another thing to dismantle things when people already have benefits. And you could say, well, Donald Trump wants to allow you to keep your kid on till he or she is 26, not allow insurance companies to ban you for pre-existing conditions. Those cost money. If you repeal the mandate, there is no money. So how do they do this?
Two things. What is critical about the failure of Obamacare is that there were many ideas in which the Republicans agreed with, like pre-existing condition, like keeping children.
That was before there was Obamacare. It exists
before,
now.
exactly.
What do they do now?
What you do now is you reconfigure it, amongst other things that's not allowed under Obamacare.
You know what reconfigure means? That you don't know how to do it. I don't mean, with all due respect, all these words, repeal, replace.
If you'll give me a moment,
yeah,
give me a moment.
I will give you a moment.
There have been 3 substantial bills submitted by Republicans that were defeated by the Democrats in the Senate that dealt with a variety of issues, for example, of allowing buying of policies across state lines.
But didn't deal with how you pay for any of these things, right?
Some of it was around paying it.
Democrats say they're going to fight like hell over this thing. Chuck Schumer has said this deal. Again, they don't have the votes if it turns out Republicans stay unified. Is it a done deal that Obamacare is gone? I mean, it is the number one priority, I would say, of Donald Trump.
Right.
Is it gone?
Well, some Democrats say they're going to fight like hell. Other Democrats say, look, if there's a better plan than the ACA, I'd be for that.
But that also doesn't mean anything. I mean,
well, it doesn't. But I think the devil's going to be in the working. If Democrats, I do believe this, want people to have health insurance. So if it's a choice between completely dismantling the ACA over our dead bodies, Democrats, or coming up with something that would retain health insurance for people, I think Democrats are going to take that.
Well, but also, most of those numbers that were on health care were people who were put through Medicaid who were eligible prior to it and weren't actually on.
Yeah, but there are a lot of federal subsidies for a lot of those 20 million people, and a lot of those 20 million people live in Republican states. What do the Republicans do about that? Throw low-income people in their own communities off the insurance rolls?
Right, that's the absolute question. And so when Republicans basically will determine their own fate here, and the Republican Party may not necessarily operate in lockstep. So even though they don't necessarily need Democrats to make the Obamacare repeal happen, those Republicans are still going to be affected.
May not necessarily walk in lockstep. What was day one? Lauren, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Jim, pleasure as
Thanks,
always.
Happy New Year.
Scott, great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.